Hey traders, Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group with your end of day recap for Monday. And there was a little bit of volatility in the beginning of the day, but markets came back pretty nicely here. So SPY never really broke down that much. You could see the candle still kind of moving around for S&P, but basically we were down. SPYs were down 30 basis points. They got down to almost about 60 basis points, so double that, and we had a nice midday to end of day recovery. There was a nice buying balance on the close that kind of helped the markets. Same thing with Qs. Qs almost got back to flat on the day. Look at NQ or QQQ. And you can see they're both kind of sitting right at the top of value. It looks like Qs kind of snuck into value from Friday. We managed to close above, but slightly in value. And I think this is good in terms of we've been overbought now for the last couple weeks using the relative strength index. I've been talking about that quite a bit, and it looks like we finally just burned off these overbought levels here throughout the last week, and we've basically retraced almost this whole bar from last Wednesday in the S&P. So I think a lot still kind of remains to be seen. I continue to like every time it seems like we have a little bit of a dip. There's buyers that come back into this market. There was a couple sectors that were in particular notable today. XOP, oil and gas. If we go to the chart of XOP, it's hanging on to the 200-day moving average. So it's been here for the last week and a half, and there continues to be call buyers who step in. There was a decent, this was aggressive, the March 40 calls that were bought. So not this week's, but next week's calls were bought for about right around 14 cents, 13, 14 cents. So somebody is thinking that energy gets a little bit of a bounce here, and it was one of the strongest sectors of the day. Every time the market dipped a bit, this kind of went a little bit under and into the red, but you could kind of see as buyers came back in, XOP finished up about 60 basis points. So by no means not a huge day. Energy also a little bit, XLE a little bit above the 200-day moving average. Nothing really that much to talk about in that name today. And then semis. Semis look like they were on the verge of kind of breaking down a little bit today, but we saw some buyers come in. Micron just continues to get upgrades, not SMU, MU. So a nice day for Micron. MRVL. I'm not really sure what they're doing here, why they would want to add more to their position, but this position, this MRVL March 16 calls has, I think it had about 21,000 of open interest on it today. So they did go above. I would normally think that they would be closing them out and maybe rolling them this close to expiration. But you can look at the daily chart and you can see if you go to the 5-minute, you could see this is where those calls went up, and big green candle here. So it actually looks like they may have added to their position. I'll check open interest tomorrow. You could kind of hear in my voice. I can't believe it that they would do that. But now MRVL is now post earnings. They had earnings towards the end of last week, and they've been kind of hanging in there since then. So it sounds like somebody likes this name. Also, take a look at this name. Microchip. This team had earnings about I guess a couple weeks ago. Real nice name, real strong performance today. Even Nvidia and AMD kind of came back from the lows. These names were down pretty hard today, and completely recovered all the way back. It did still finish down on the day, but it was down well over a couple percent today. And AMD actually came back to finish up on the day. So nice recovery. We kind of watched some of these names on the lows. Amazon had a nice recovery from the lows as well. A lot of weakness in the morning. Same thing with Apple. There was a couple of big blocks that went up in Apple. So, it just goes to show you that in some of the stronger names, buyers continue to come in, even when you don't even get them. It's not even allowing the name to really be down for a couple days. There was 66,000 of these that went up. Some were swept. A lot were just blocks, outright blocks. There was two separate blocks of 30,000 that went up, which sometimes it tells me, you could see the implied volatility not really do much. It doesn't either. It's either a stock replacement something of that sort. But then we also see the same strike a little bit later. We actually saw some calls being swept on the March 140s. Also, this June 145 strike, which is where the two blocks actually occurred as well. So don't know exactly what they're doing there, but that was in the beginning of the day, and Apple recovered quite nicely from the lows. Whoa, a little bit zoomed in. Other groups that were particularly weak this morning, the steel names, so not quite as big of a recovery. They did not go down any lower. This is an area that I would kind of keep my eye on. It does look like it's breaking down here, so it did not have an end of day recovery. Finished a little bit off the lows. But I would watch this group SLX, that is the steel ETF. It looks like you got a sell signal here. Using the MACD, the sell signal happened on this bar, but we now are back at the bottom of value here. So we want to see this group come back here a little bit. Don't want to see this break below value. What else for the day was notable? XME and you know, the funny thing about this type of market, it just shows you. I was reading somebody's note and they were talking about how shorts got burned today. I don't think shorts got burned today. I don't think really anybody is really you know, we just didn't see a lot of big heavy put activity. I just think it was a little bit of a lack of buying this morning, and you could see, for example, why I don't think that this is shorts got burned today is because you know, we just didn't see, there wasn't a big bid to bonds this morning. It's just a lack of, you know, I think this morning there's just a lack of buyers going on. Maybe a little bit of profit taking in a couple different sectors and a little bit of reducing positions. But I really don't think this is shorts getting involved in this market. You could see bonds finished, they finished down about 20 basis points. And then also gold. So, you know, if I thought that people were shorting the market, and if I thought there was some rotation going out of equities, you would have to see where they would be putting their money. Now, of course, they could be rotating them into cash, but a lot of portfolio managers just can't do that. So they usually go into a little bit of short-term bonds or even long-term bonds, and I don't see that really taking place. The same thing with gold. I don't see anybody really rushing into gold. Gold, I think this is look at GLD because it looks like there's a new session has started. But gold finished down 70 basis points. GDXJ just continues to get smacked. This is a good lesson in watching the 200-day moving average. If you're playing for a trend above the 200, you have to respect it on the downside too, because look at this thing get absolutely smoked since it broke the 200-day moving average. So really bad there. Also, retail did come back a little bit today, but XRT did finish close to the lows to the day. But take a look at this chart. We are actually just balancing right around here, this previous low here. So keep an eye on that. DKS actually reports tomorrow. Look at this is also a group that's below the 200-day moving average once again. So be on the look for that. What else? I wanted to talk a little bit about IWM. IWM continues to be weak. It did come back, which is a good sign. I'm saying this kind of the same thing over and over, as names did come back towards the end of the day, including small caps. So small caps were down about 1.2%. They were hung down at around 1.1% for the good portion of the morning, and then came back, and you kind of have a hammer bar coming today. So I think that's a positive sign, because you know, you looked at things around 11 o'clock this morning and you're like, ooh, we're starting to kind of turn the corner to move down here, which isn't necessarily a horrible thing. We've got our defined support for IWM, but it just means, you know, how long is the negative going to last? And with a save like this in IWM, I won't be surprised if it reclaims and tries to get back towards the top of value the end of the month. Excuse me, the end of the week. If not, if I'm wrong, we've got support 136.29 in the IWM ETF. Just to talk a little bit about single stock flow in options, CRM, real nice risk reversal, bull risk reversal in CRM. So I think I have brought this up earlier, but CRM. You could see calls. So this is known as a bull risk reversal, when calls are bought and puts are sold. You know, I was kind of left out of this trade today. I put my alert. You could see what it's doing after hours, as they announced a deal with a partnership with IBM, but let me just forget about this for a minute. I was looking at where I set my alert was right at the top of value, and they mentioned this on the halftime show. One of the Nigerians mentioned this flow in Salesforce, so I didn't want to buy it on them mentioning it. But in hindsight, so I had my alert go off, and I'm like, I don't really want to buy it on the mention. Usually, you want to be taking profits when they start to mention this stuff, but it turns out that this was a pretty good signal. So I did set my alert here. I just did not pull my trigger for various reasons on this one, and the stock's trading now at 84. So this was a boo-boo by me. One name I did get into today, so I need to turn from that screen. So take a look at FCX. So this is, you could see that we're right at the 200-day moving average here in FCX. I did put on a position. This is a name that I've been stalking for the last week. I can actually pull up last week's flow. We saw a nice call buyer in FCX January 17 calls. That went up for $1.44. So I always like when you get into, and I mentioned this one day last week, that you don't always have to get involved when the trade hits the tape. You can kind of take your time and pick a spot. So I picked my spot today, right on the 200-day moving average. There was a couple stories out. I think there's a possible strike that may be happening, and I know that there's a little bit of bad news out there with FCX, but sorry, but I don't really care. I know where my stop is. It's the 200-day moving average. So nice entry today, close to it. This is really on a big dip at this point. So if it breaks the 200-day moving average, and hopefully it won't do it on a big move, I'll be out. That's my stop. So only about, considering where the stock is, 1290, and we're looking at 1260, I could lose 40 or 50 cents potentially on this trade if it does break the 200-day moving average. If not, I'm going to stay long versus that 200-day moving average out to these January 17 calls that I bought today. So that was the trade that I put on today. A couple of other notable trades that we saw today. We did see Facebook calls being swept a couple times today. Facebook, managed to have a decent day, especially from the lows when we started to see the calls being purchased. You look at these things and Facebook didn't have a huge day, up 18 basis points, but if you look at where the calls went up right on the lows of the day, it actually did have a decent day. We did see some IBM calls as well. I always look on the calendar when I see weekly calls being purchased, and they do have their analyst day tomorrow. So a lot of the times you see this weekly stuff, and you see people on Twitter talk about it. Oh, there's weeklies bought. You look at the calendar and you see what's up, and a lot of times you do see these weekly calls being bought for either an investor day or an analyst day. So they have that tomorrow for IBM. Also, we saw a lot of Starbucks weekly calls. It's like, oh, these guys on Twitter, oh, these calls are being bought in Starbucks. Well, they've got a couple meetings coming up. They're presenting at the UBS Global Consumer and Retail Conference. So you don't know. You never know why somebody is purchasing weekly calls, but it kind of makes sense when you see one of their analyst days or events. There was 23,000. So I did buy a little bit of these. They were cheap. They were around, I think, around 40 cents. Excuse me, 30 cents. So, a cheapy play if you want to speculate on a meeting, that's an easy way to do it where you're only risking 30 cents. So while I generally, of course, I don't put on weekly positions and don't risk a lot of money in weeklies, but something that's cheap and you know what your defined risk is, if you're okay with losing 30 cents on a trade, which is your total risk that you could lose on that particular weekly, then hey, maybe they come out with something on that UBS meeting that's on Thursday. What else did we see? We saw a nice call spread in XBI, the June 80-85 call spread. We also saw a small risk reversal, just like we said in Salesforce. We also saw some Baidu calls being purchased versus a sale of puts. And you could see this name is it's been moving down a bit. So it's now 3 days after their earnings, sitting also right on the 200-day moving average. So if you want to take a shot at Baidu, you've got your support. If you think if it may hold the 200, great. If it ends up missing, you're not too far down here, and you can get out pretty soon in that one. What else? Bud. We also saw buyer and Bud calls. We've actually been seeing some call buying since they had earnings was it last week? They've been seeing a little bit of a we've been seeing a little bit of a repeat call buyer that came in. That's been coming in since they've had earnings. And then the last one. Right before the close, there was a purchase of about 5,700 of the MGM weekly calls. Again, another name that's right on the 200-day moving average. Again, had a not so great earnings report, but kind of stuck right at the 200-day moving average. So this was also a cheapy play. So you could really speculate on a couple of these things and not spend that much money. They bought those for 11 cents. So keep in mind, some of these trades you can get for a little bit cheaper for just a week. If you want to speculate on a couple day trade, there you go. 27 calls. 27 is right here. So maybe somebody's expecting a bounce from the 200-day moving average or some news coming out in that name. So that's it for the Monday video. Thank you for watching and have a great night. Thanks.